everybody, it's Calxiyn here. If you guys enjoyed this video, remember that if you guys want to support the channel, you guys should become patrons over on Patreon. Today we are going to be talking about why the RWBY villains fail. And we're gonna get to that. And today we're gonna really focus on the problem among Salems Faction, because that's sort of where everything is happening right here. That instead of being, I suppose, directly engaged with the protagonist, they're sort of just floating around in space and are placed where needed. But RWBY does have good examples of, like, what actual, you know, villains in conflict should be. They're just not in Salems Faction. They are Jaques and Raven, to an extent. So I want to talk about them first to show you guys a good example of what we're talking about and then compare them to the villains that are in Salems Faction. Jaques and Raven have forced Yang and Weiss to grow as characters, not only pushing them to have greater development, but also forwarding their growth and giving them more dimension. And I believe this is because of the fact that Weiss and Jaques especially have the same goal, but they're operating under two completely different ideologies. They both want to preserve the Schnee family name, and they both think that the other is driving it into the ground. They both have the same goal, but yet so vastly different points of view that they are engaged in this strong conflict even when Jaques wasn't present. As, you know, far as the Weiss trailer to Volume 3, you know, we get sprinkles of his influence everywhere, from him cutting her credit cards, to her not wanting to talk to her father when she calls the Schnee Dust Company in Volume 2, how he influenced her childhood, as she mentions in Volume 1. Raven and Yang have a similar dynamic, as they both want to be strong, but have very different definitions of strength, which is echoed in Volume 5. Similar to Weiss and Jaques, Raven and Yang both have the same goal, but conflicting ideologies, which puts them in conflict with one another, especially nearing the end of the volume. The problem with the villains in Salems Faction is that none of them do this, and it ends up hurting the protagonists. Your heroes are only as good as the monsters they fight, and this is creating a problem where the story and characters aren't completely realized because the forces of antagonism aren't strong enough, or they're simply not there. So I want to stray away from RWBY for a second to use what I think is probably the best villain in cinema we've come across for a while. Would you agree with that, Hunter?
I'd agree.
And that is Killmonger from Black Panther. How T'Challa and Killmonger both want the same thing, to do what's best for who they perceive as their people, right? T'Challa is very nationalistic. He's sort of only concerned about his kingdom, while Killmonger is focused more on race instead of just Wakandans. He wants to help Africans everywhere, as he says in the movie, right? Mm-hmm. And they want to do the same thing, but are at, like, two extremes, where T'Challa wants to hide away from the world and be inactive, and Killmonger wants to sort of throw the world into some violence and be active. And I think that that is the important thing about Weiss and Jaques and Raven and Yang, is they all believe that what they're doing, or what they were doing, is the right thing, despite how clearly, like, distinct their views are, just like T'Challa and Killmonger. They both think that they're doing what's correct for the cause that they're fighting for. They don't sort of think that what they're doing is wrong and doing it anyway, which makes them much more compelling, I think. And this brings us to Salems Faction, right? The people who are supposed to be the villains here, right? Cinder, Adam, Tyrion, Watts, Hazel. They don't really do this for any character. They feel like they're almost temporarily there just to fill voids where the story requires them, instead of making them have relationships with the protagonists. And this ends up making them obsolete because they don't really change anything. It's like, oh, Watts, go over here. Watts, go over there. Tyrion, can you do this? How about that instead? Never mind. Like, they're just sort of thrown around, and I guess, like, they're thrown around on orders, which makes sense because Salem's just, you know, putting them everywhere, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have to have direct conflict with somebody, right? And this is what sort of bothers me about when people talk about Blake and RWBY having character issues. They can only be developed, you know, as much as the antagonizing threat, right? Or, like, agonizing threat in some cases. Upon occasion, right? Pushes them into development, and RWBY doesn't really have one now that Roman's gone, and Adam's sort of just lackluster in this department, and we don't have time to fix Adam or Cinder in this video, so I want to go all the way back to Roman. And I think Roman was really good for RWBY because he sort of opened up, you know, the horrors of the real world to her, especially in his final dialogue. He pushed her into sort of realizing the harsh reality of the world that they're in, and this is only furthered by first Penny dying and then after Pyrrha dying, right? And I think this is why Roman is so perfect for RWBY, because they have such conflicting ideologies about something so similar. Like, Roman, to me, seems like he developed this way of thinking over time because of the harshness of his life. That, you know, he'll do whatever he can do to survive. And RWBY, I feel, is almost looking at Roman and seeing what she could give into if she gives into sort of pessimism or fear or her instinct to simply survive instead of fight, if that makes sense. And I think that this is really emphasized in the manga, where RWBY seems to really struggle with the desire to simply be normal instead of being a huntress and putting her life on the line. So you can see that sort of instinct to almost preserve herself in that moment, which, you know, is what Roman is doing, right? RWBY could choose not to be a huntress for her own survival, and to that extent, Roman chose what was right for his own survival. They're on similar grounds, but they decided that what they're doing is super different, you know? But even then, I wouldn't say that Roman was perfect. You know, he did have his problems in that department, but I think that he did do a good job compared to everybody else that we have going on here. So let's get to, you know, the Salem Squad, if you want to call it that.
Salem Squad?
Anyway.
They should have t-shirts of that, Cal.
I would like to lay down who should be in direct conflict with who, in terms of Salem's villains, and why, and I think that you know, keep in mind there are going to be new villains announced soon, but I think that everything that we already have in front of us makes sense. And this is what I sort of, like, what kills me, is that it's all here. The foundation for it, like, it's all right here. It's just a matter of them sort of, like, realizing it and then using it and making it better. And I think that they can do it, so I do have faith in them. But let's go on. Salem should obviously be in direct conflict with Ozpin. This is basically the easiest one. They're both the leaders of their opposing factions. All of their dialogue together sort of in Volume 1 and Volume 3 sort of, you know, sets it up that they're supposed to be like light and darkness, good and evil. They're fighting each other. They're both trying to destroy each other, but they're going, you know, totally different ways about it. And they both think that destroying each other is the right thing to do. At least it seems that way for now. Tyrion, I think, should be in direct conflict with RWBY. Tyrion was basically humiliated and embarrassed by Salem because he failed to capture RWBY, and on top of that, he didn't even kill Crow correctly, right? And so, you know, he was basically scalded, right? And she cut off his tail, so, like, there's some beef there already. Tyrion should be the opposing force that continues to make RWBY feel unsafe and threatened until she hits a breaking point. And she did express to Oscar, right, that she is scared. And I think that what makes them on the same grounds here, like sort of how we talked about everybody else sort of has the same grounds earlier, right, with Weiss and Jaques and Raven and Yang, and then T'Challa and Killmonger, right? One of these things is not like the other.
My favorite RWBY character.
I know. Tyrion and RWBY are both so loyal to their cause that, I don't know, maybe that they could be a bit blind, right? That Tyrion is sort of blind to what he does for Salem, like he worships her, right? And maybe it would be interesting if RWBY was sort of on that verge of worshipping Ozpin, so you could see that they're exactly, like, alike almost, but that Tyrion is just sort of a, like, down the line he started to become insane, while RWBY is fresh in her insanity, I guess. You know?
Nothing like new insanity. It has that new insanity smell.
I think that Watts should be in direct conflict with Ironwood. Like, Watts is the one who hacked into his phone, who turned all his robots and his airships against him, and basically sort of disgraced him, right? And the common ground for them is that they're both in a place where they could be disgraced, right? Watts is already a disgraced scientist, and Ironwood, if he isn't too careful, will be disgraced military personnel. So I think that what Watts should do is basically push Ironwood into paranoia of losing his position, but then Ironwood should realize that by being sort of this scared to lose, you know, he is going to lose, because that paranoia is causing him to do the disgraceful actions he was afraid of in the first place. And that kind of puts Watts in a good position right there to sort of, I don't know, torment him a little bit and have him grow. And they're both from Atlas, so you also have that. They probably already know each other, and so it could fit really well.
You just how, like me, like I and Drake are both from Canada, and we know each other.
Yeah, you know Drake.
We're very good friends.
Hazel should be in direct conflict with Crow, just like how Crow lost Summer. You know, Hazel lost his sister, and that immediately puts them on some common ground. Like, they both love somebody that they lost, or they both lost somebody that they loved very much, and this could be developed that they're both working with Ozpin and Salem, so Salem and Ozpin won't ever kill anybody again like they killed the person that they loved. But, like, there's sort of a little bit of irony in that, you know what I mean? Because they both ended up killing the person that they cared about, and yet they're both sort of, you know, fighting to stop the other, even though the other is also killed. Like, each side has bloodshed, but yet they keep, you know, opposing the different side without realizing that Salem has caused her bout of harm too, I suppose, on, you know, on Hazel's end, or that Ozpin has caused his bout of harm on Crow's end, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is only furthered by the fact that Hazel has dealt with silver-eyed warriors before. Like, there's already a clear conflict there. If, you know, Hazel is the one that killed Summer, Crow can be like, well, how are you any better than Ozpin? You killed somebody that I cared about too, you know? Obviously not like that, but I'm not writing dialogue here, okay? Anyway, I think that would be really good. Cinder should obviously be in direct conflict with Jon at this point. You guys may be surprised to hear me say that, because some of y'all, like, know that I'm not a big Jon fan, but, like, listen, I do what makes sense, and this makes sense, right? Cinder and Jon both want to be strong, right? Cinder is the girl that wanted power. Jon faked his transcript so he could get good, right? And I think that what's more interesting here is that Cinder has this, like, power to destroy, right? Like, basically, almost everything she touches with the maiden powers, but Jon has the power to heal. So it's a very nice contrast that they both, like, have sort of found what they believe is power in different ways. Like, Cinder wants to destroy everything, but Jon's strength that he's been looking for all this time is to instead heal people, and I'm like, that would be good if they talked about it.
Or if they drew more direct conflict.
Exactly. If they don't have to, like, tell us everything.
Yes.
They just need to, like,
yes, which I think is RWBY's
exist.
issue, in that they want to keep up this air of mystery about the antagonists.
Yeah.
But you can't do that and
it's too late, like...
you can't do that, or you can at least do that, like, keep that air of mystery, but at least have them interact more.
Yeah.
Where you can create...
Because, I mean, that's not a mystery. They told
two.
us that about Cinder. So, like, that's already, even if they wanted to keep it mysterious, like, they already have something in common, even with the basics that you could say, right? Now, sort of last but not least over here, Emerald should be in direct conflict with Weiss. They obviously are polar opposites. Like, Weiss came from everything, Emerald came from nothing, and yet they both sort of ended up in this circumstance where they wanted to sort of break free, and so they chose like a very, you could say, unconventional life, because that's the whole thing. Like, why would a Schnee need to become a huntress, right? And, like, why would Emerald need to join a cult? Like, it's all the same thing. Anyway. And so I think that that's pretty easy there, and I think Emerald could even bring that up, like, you came from everything and you're still doing this, and, you know, like...
I'm just like, I made poor life decisions.
So there's that. Like, I think that speaks for itself, so I'm not gonna go around in circles. And Mercury should be in direct conflict with Yang. Like, you know, Mercury's already dragged Yang in front of the entire world. Like, he made Yang look like some, like, violent, sore winner who punched him in the leg and, like, broke his bones, you know what I mean? So they already have that beef. But even in terms of, like, parentals, right? Mercury's father was an assassin that killed people. Raven's done, some questionable activities, if I do say so myself. And I don't know if Mercury has necessarily, like, been super developed yet, but we could say that he wanted to be strong to get back at his father, because he did kind of kill him and burn their house down. And so, like I said earlier, how Raven and Yang conflict over their idea of strength, Mercury and Yang can also conflict over the idea of strength that is presented to them. And I think that would be super interesting, that Mercury sees strength as, like, burning down his father's house. And Yang sees strength as letting Raven go, right? So that could be too. Like, Mercury killed his father, Yang sort of still wants to make peace.
By taking action or leaving good enough alone.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that. And then... again, Adam should be in direct conflict with Blake. I'm not gonna talk about this too much, but, like, Adam, I think, should have been, like, Killmonger a bit more. Like, they made it seem like in Volume 5 that he didn't care about Faunus equality anymore, like, he had a personal grudge or something. Like, Blake sort of mentions that, like, he's sort of turned, I don't want to say turned selfish, but I think that's kind of what she's getting at, that he's doing it for himself, he's not doing it for the Faunus anymore, but that's just not very interesting, because Blake doesn't necessarily have selfish tendencies that they can work off of, like, to get a common ground, You know what I mean? It would have been more interesting if they were both fighting for faunus equality, sort of like Ilya and Blake, which is like a whole other video. Like, Ilya and Blake did this better than Ilya and Adam, which is sort of unfortunate.
The gays will always do it better, Cal. You fuckers just need to appreciate that.
Yeah, and so I feel like with Adam, it could have been the same thing. Like, Adam was going to a violent extreme while Blake was going to a too peaceful extreme, and like, I don't know, somehow they could have met in the middle. Because that's kind of what happens at the end of Black Panther. He does have a middle ground where he's like, alright, we're taking action, but not like that
Not like
action.
genocide action.
Exactly.
The second you said, like, I wish Adam and Blake were more like T'Challa and Killmonger, I'm like, that's the greatest idea anyone ever had. But I also need to accept that, like, most things would be better and
if they were like Black
if it was more like Black Panther.
Yeah.
I'm like, like Kingdom Hearts, but like, imagine if it was like Black Panther. Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's just kind of where we're ending off here. I have other videos that I have planned where I want to kind of go through all these ideas more and, like, thoroughly explain them, because I think it would be nice to sort of not do a rewrite, but do, like, a future write, if that makes sense. But before we end off things here, I just want, sort of, Hunter, if you have anything to say, kind of go ahead. Go do your thing.
I think, I like that you're trying to keep my snarkiness in line, but I do generally really enjoy that idea. I feel if, though, my favorite quote anyone ever, I don't even know the woman, it was just this random person on Tumblr, but it was like, I love how Rooster Teeth is being so precious with gay characters, but treated, racism, like, with a chainsaw. And so I like I like the idea of maybe just furthering that dynamic between Adam and
it's not too late. And that's what I really want to stress here, guys, is that this isn't a video of that's just gonna be us, like, bitching, right? This is like the prologue to, like, a series of videos that I'd like to do on the channel. Like, it's not too late. Like, maybe Adam can have a moment where he's like, I got so wrapped up in, like, my grudge against Blake that I forgot about what I was fighting for, and that's the faunus. So, like, you know, that doesn't make him a better guy, but it also sort of establishes, like, he's regaining focus, but he's still doing it wrong. You know what I mean? He's still, like, oh, I'm gonna go back and fight for faunus equality, but I still want to kill everyone. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that, I feel like, would kind of bring things round circle, you know what I mean? And, like, he would still be bad, but at the same time, he could sort of, you know, have a self-realization that maybe what he was doing was only hurting his cause, and even though we recognize that his cause is awful, right, we can maybe appreciate that he's getting back on track, you know what I mean? Something like that. But again, that's a whole other video, so anything else, Hunter, or are you good?
I am good.
Alright, so I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Remember, again, if you guys do want to support us, you guys should become patrons over on Patreon. This is something new that I've been trying to do. Like, I've kind of been losing my mind trying to figure out, like, I don't know. It's just, we gotta change it up over here, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed it, because we've recorded this, like, 3 times with edits, and, like, we worked really hard on it, is what I'm trying to say.
So, Cal, you know, I like your new idea for videos, but, like, could it be more like Black Panther?
Oh my god, Hunter. Anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed this. Bye!